At the end of a long day, I used that metaphor at the beginning that we travelling a path. Today feels more like a motorway. We've been a long distance. Geographically, from dark nights in Finland with a few hours of sunlight down to Brazil, the favelas of Brazil, from the hippocampus in the brain to problems concerning the political aspects of the world and United Nations. So it's been a long day, and we don't want to add any more to it. So to conclude, I'm going to tell you just a little story, just a tiny little anecdote. And I think it's a wonderful example of how social, emotional education and creativity can actually be done very, very simply. You know, if we give ourselves great ideals, there's always creeps in, well, we're not going to get there. I'm not going to get there. I can't do this. It's too much. And one sort of gives up and says, become cynical, accept the world as it is. But as you see, the attention behind us all here as educators, any teacher wants to be able to bring something to the world. They have the hope of the future in the children in their care, the children they serve. And that's a basic attitude of soul that applies to any pedagogue. So we don't have time, we don't have space for cynicism, but we do have time for weariness sometimes. The expectations are too great. But sometimes it's the little things that can inspire. This is about Gandhi's second sandal. It's a little story about Gandhi. Very tiny story, but it shows how in an instant, a spontaneous instant, you can be creative and social, emotional and ethical, just like that. And we all have that capacity. Gandhi was traveling on the train service in South Africa, and he was scrambling onto a train, into a carriage, just before it was about to leave, and his sandal fell off onto the floor, onto the rails. And what did he do? He took his other sandal off and threw it to join. That's creativity. That moment. One sandal is no use to him. He's not going to walk around like that. But two sandals is useful for someone else who finds them. He couldn't get off the train to get it, was to depart. And that's that moment, yes? And that's what we want our children to be able to see, this seizing the moment. And we've heard about the Greeks, and this was what the Greeks really celebrated, this ability to perceive and react in a positive fashion to whatever comes towards us. The great story of Odysseus is that story of someone who sees and can turn it to the good, to the better, out of a situation that can be dire, tragic, disastrous, miserable, but there's something you can do as a human being to turn it round. And that's a skill, that's a competence. And our work is very much to be able to perceive that moment. When is the time right? And from the work we're doing with our colleagues around the world, on these themes, it seems to us now the time is right. There's so many questions about education, bringing up children, the role of childhood in the modern world, that now the time is right. Which means we can all become advocates, not just the platform, not just the experts, not just the politicians, but in our daily lives as educators working with children, we can seize that moment. And knowing that each of us is doing that in their own individual way, wherever they are, however they do it, gives us all a united strength, a capacity to bring about the change that's so desperately required for all our children in the world. Not just in the Western world, I think we also take out the whole world. There's a crying out for this change, this transformation of what we do in our schools, in our kindergartens, and also in our teacher training and higher educational institutions. Yes, the world is looking for that. Our young people are looking at us to be responsible to help bring that change about. And I said it can happen in very small ways. The Gandhi sandal is actually a way of changing the world. So I'd like to leave it there. I'm passing to Fatima to finish, but I'd like to thank you all very much for the long patience and your endurance to getting through such a lengthy day, and hope that somehow you find some richness in that, something that you can find inspiring and strengthening for all the work you're also doing in the world to help our children. So thank you.